Well, welcome back to Why We Buy It. My name's Kobe, and today I want to talk about one of the most iconic watches to come out of Switzerland. One of the most recognizable watches to come out of Switzerland. It is by an independent watch brand that's family owned and always has been, but it's rarely talked about. You don't hear about it much anymore, and that's because it really only has one particular design it's known for, and it's design that was created back in 1944 by one of the most iconic designers. It is a quintessentially Swiss watch, and always will be. And some of you may already know which watch I'm talking about, but for those of you that don't, hang on for just a moment, and I'll reveal one of the most iconic watches to ever come out of Switzerland that you rarely ever hear about. Let's get into it. So the watch I'm going to talk about today is the Mondaine Swiss Railway watch. And this has got to be one of the most iconic designs in terms of horology out of Switzerland, because it's all about a design that was created specifically for the Swiss Railway back in 1944. They wanted a reliable clock that was easy to read from a good distance off, that also represented the Swiss Railway. And what the designer from Bauhaus came up with is a high contrast, simple design. I mean, that's what Bauhaus is really known for, is a utilitarian design. But what makes it really Swiss, and specifically Swiss Railway, is the use of that red lollipop second hand, because it is a representation of the lollipop wave markers that the railway used to use to signal trains as to which track and such they'd be going on. But the idea was to have a timepiece, a clock, that the conductors and such could see from a long way off, so that the train system itself could run at a more on time and integrated system no matter where you were in Switzerland. So that was the idea behind it. And then Mondaine saw this design and realized it would work just as well on your wrist as it would hanging from a post. So they made a deal to license the design, and they're the only ones to do it, and create a wristwatch based on it. The company has been going on since then, making primarily this watch, and that's one of the reasons why you don't hear about it all that often. The one thing I would probably fault Mondaine for, and maybe they've got good reason for doing it, is that this is really their only design. I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots from their website, and you'll notice that practically every watch looks like this, save a couple different almost cushion style cases, and of course the chronographs that they include as part of their catalog. But really it's just a Swiss Railway watch with a chronograph complication on top of it. And there are so many different colorways. They're all high contrast, of course, to maintain the legibility factor. And they come in a number of different materials depending on what you're after, in both quartz and automatic. And the last time you probably really heard about Mondaine as a watch enthusiast is like roughly 5 years ago, when their stop-to-go movement was so popular amongst the watch bloggers and YouTubers alike, because it was such an interesting, unique movement to them, right? Nobody else was really doing it. And they still make that watch today, although you hadn't heard about it for a while because they had some issues with that movement a few years back and didn't really push that model until this year now. Because I've seen it appear in a number of Mondaine wall clocks, which you can come across a few of their videos online, But now it's going back into wristwatches. And for the longest time, one of the places I get my watches serviced is Right Time Watches at Union Station here in Toronto. And they're an authorized Mondaine dealer, but I hadn't seen the Stop to Go wristwatch in their selection of Mondaine timepieces for quite some time. The last time I was there, it was being highlighted as kind of a new product, so to speak, for those that hadn't seen it before. But that tells me that it's back, and it's probably a little more reliable, I would hope, than the last iteration of that particular movement. And it got me thinking, maybe it's time to break out my old Mondaine Swiss Railway watch, because although this did not appear in my State of the Collection video, I owned it. Right? It's a watch I owned. It's just the Ronda, I believe 513 movement that's inside this, a Quartz movement, had finally failed. And I hadn't got around to fixing it or getting it replaced, because that's one of the advantages to buying Quartz. Sure, there are some very inexpensive automatic movements available that you could replace if necessary, but replacing an automatic movement is generally more work, more time, more skill required than just replacing a Quartz movement. And Quartz movements, for the most part, especially just simple three-hander Quartz movements, are dirt cheap. Very cheap. I just hadn't got around to it. And when I saw that, it kind of triggered Mondaine in my memory, because it's been sitting in my kind of defunct box closet for quite some time. Thought I'd break it out and see what it would take to get it working again. Didn't take much. Quite literally, I dropped it off. 1 week later, I picked it up, and here she is back in my collection. But a lot of watch enthusiasts, a lot of watch collectors, they kind of ignore Quartz. You really shouldn't, right? Because this is one of the most inexpensive versions of the Mondaine Swiss Railway watch, right? And of course, they have a number of different colorways. They use a number of different materials. But for the most part, right, this design, this is it, outside of their chronographs, but really it's just a chronograph module on top of this. It's all it is. But when what you really want is that iconic design, you don't really have to have the most elaborate automatic movement inside it, because that's not what you're buying it for, right? A lot of times you got to remember, why are you buying the watch? If you're buying it because it has a very intricate, elaborate movement with some high complications, then by all means, look for the absolute best you can afford. But if you're buying it because the design of the watch is iconic, then it's what's on the outside that counts. And where this watch really came in handy for me, and it's not something I talk about much now on this channel, but I'm an avid golfer. I became a golf addict kind of later in life, but once I started playing golf, I was absolutely hooked. And one of the things I realized right off the bat was that what watch I wear can affect how I play. I don't like feeling a heavy weight on my wrist when I'm swinging the club, right? I don't want to wear an expensive watch on my wrist when I'm playing any kind of sport, even something as low impact as golf, because things can happen out on the course, right? I don't want to scratch up my nicest watches, But really what I want something is light to the point where I don't really notice it, fits well, right? Is highly legible, because quite often you're out in the bright, bright sun, and if you don't have a very legible dial, you're not going to be able to read it, and what's the point, right? And something that won't move around on my wrist mid-swing, right? When I'm swinging as fast as I can, when I'm cranking driver, I don't want to feel it moving around on my wrist. And this ticks all those boxes, right? First of all, it's not that expensive. So, bonus there, if something goes wrong, if I bang it on something, I'm not going to freak out. It's about as legible a watch as you can find. It's really the reason this watch was created, was the legibility factor, right? It's crazy light, especially this particular version, because this particular version uses practically the case, the strap, everything except the movement is pretty much recycled materials, right? It's lightweight recycled materials. Conforms right to your wrist, and because it's got that keeper lock on it, it doesn't move around, right? It gets to the point where I don't even feel it. It's just there when I need it, and it doesn't matter how bright the sun is. I can read it. So it did all that. So this was the watch I generally wore golfing most of the time. I pretty much wore it golfing all the time until, the movement finally crapped out on me. And another thing about this particular design, especially the black on white, is that it's a total strap monster, and I'll show you with the additional strap it came with, again, made from recycled materials. But also it can be used in so many different applications. They show this watch with a suit quite often in their marketing materials. It's one of the things Mondaine does, is it kind of wants you to know that this goes well in a formal setting. It really does, because being quartz, number one, it's super slim, right? It's got that one little tiny touch of red, but that's only stands out when you look at it, right? Black on white, it basically disappears, and because it's so light, you don't even feel it. It works well with a suit, and with the tightest cuff, it just slides right under. So you can't really go wrong there. And although I'm a little critical about the fact that they only really utilize this design, obviously it's working for them, because they've never had to sell out, right? They're still family owned. It's never changed hands. This is obviously enough for them to do enough business to thrive. So maybe I shouldn't be critical. Maybe it's just the watch enthusiast in me, and the fact that we are barraged with new micro brands coming out with interesting and wild designs to kind of grab us. But when you have something that's as iconic as this, as legible as this, that works in so many situations, then why fix what isn't broken? And I think that's the Mondaine philosophy, really. Outside of being one of the most sustainable and green earth conscious watch brands in existence, where this gets manufactured, that facility in Switzerland, it's like 80% of the power required is solar powered, right? They made an effort to reduce their carbon footprint that way. And then creating watches like this one and many others in their catalog that use recycled materials is, once again, trying to be green earth conscious. So you got to commend them for that. And it's not something that you see heavily advertised, at least not in North America. And in the watch industry, where quite often profit is number one and the cost can be reduced by not using green energy, it's not something you see all that often, or at least see highlighted. So I give them credit for that, and it's one of the reasons why I purchased an Essence model from them. I do like the additional strap that came with it. It's a fun thing to wear in the summer. But for me, it's just a watch that you can grab and go on any given day, and it's going to fulfill your needs. That's really what it's going to do. And I don't know if there's a suitable substitute out there. I do know that there's a couple of AliExpress brands that have copied this design, right? Even though they're not supposed to really, but they have copied this design, and it's, of course, it's just as legible. And quite often you can find them with dirt cheap automatic movements in them, but the difference in price isn't so great between what they're offering and the real thing that, to me, it was a no-brainer to just go ahead and buy the size case I liked. In this case, because it's, practically bezel-less, this is the 41 millimeter, and it fits me perfect. And I get that iconic design from the company that actually owns it. Let me know what choice you'd make. Would you want to save the $100 maybe and go with an AliExpress brand, or would you prefer to buy the original? Or would you even go that step further and buy their top of the line, stop to go, their unique movement? Spend the extra money to have something that's unlike anything else in your watch box. Would that be enough for you? Or would that lose its luster after a certain period of time because all you really wanted was that iconic design? Until next time, if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. Don't miss a single video. Sure, we cover more than watches here, but hopefully some of the other topics we cover you're interested in as well, or maybe you're gaining an interest in because of us. Any way you look at it, it'd be nice to have you aboard.